Hey YouTube, welcome back to another review video. Today we've got ourselves the Smith & Wesson 9mm shield. Now I've got two of them here for a reason, and I'm going to get into that shortly. But before we begin, the first thing I need to do is break down the guns and make sure they are safe to handle, because it's never a good idea to handle a firearm until you know they are safe. How do you know a firearm is safe to handle? Well, you check it out yourself and verify it. Never trust anyone's word when they tell you it's safe. Just like woodworking, always check twice, cut once. So we can see now there's no magazine in this one, and there's no round in the chamber. So this one here is now safe. Same thing for this gun over here. We're going to take out the magazine, empty the round from the chamber, and now we're going to inspect the gun, make sure that there is indeed no magazine, and there is no round in the chamber. So now that we have both visually inspected both of these firearms, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the ammunition far away. Before I do that, I do want to show you the difference between the different types of magazines. So typically when you buy this gun, they're going to give you two magazines. One of them is going to be an 8-round magazine, and the other one will be a 7-round. They're both virtually identical, except for the fact that the 8-round is just a slight bit longer. It also has this removable sheath here that helps it sit into the gun better, because without it, you could see it just doesn't fit right. You can see 7 rounds with the little visual indicator, 8 rounds with a visual indicator, and even though we know there's still 8 rounds in that magazine, since it went into the firearm, it's always a good idea to double check that nothing got inside of there. Accidental or not, it's still your fault if something were to happen. So I'm just going to set these all the way back there. That way they are completely out of our reach. Now we're going to primarily focus on one gun at a time, because they basically are identical guns. If you haven't figured out the difference between the two already, it is this little bit on the back. You'll notice that this one here has a little lever that this one does not. And that is because this one here has the optional thumb safety. It's not an ambidextrous safety because it's only accessible on the one side, which is something you might want to consider when you're picking up this pistol. Unfortunately, when I bought my first one of these, I didn't realize that there was an option to have it without the safety, and I personally prefer to not have the safety. Some people feel more comfortable having a gun with a safety on it, which is more than fine. If that's what you're into, then definitely feel free to pick one of these up. But for me, the reason I don't like to have the safeties is because if you ever need to use it and you're in the heat of the moment, you lose a lot of your fine motor controls anytime you have any adrenaline pumping in your system. Which means if for some reason you had to use this gun to defend your life, and this safety somehow clicked itself on, whether it was by you purposely doing it, pulling it out of your pocket, getting a better hold on it, that means you could draw it and now you're unable to pull the trigger, and you're going to take a few seconds to figure out what's wrong with your gun, by which point you could be dead. Now again, it's super simple to click on and off when you're expecting it, but in the heat of the moment, it's one more thing that you have to realize. Hey, the gun's not firing. Why isn't it firing? Oh, there's a safety. Hold on, let's see if we can flick it off. Okay, now let's fire. It's just something that you don't really think about, and it could take you a second, it might take you 10 seconds. You might not even consider the safety at all. You might think it's the magazine, so maybe you drop the magazine, reload it, and you're still, with the safety on, you can still rack rounds through the chamber, but you're unable to fire the gun. So for me, it's nice to not have to worry about the safety. It's not something that you're accidentally gonna press, pulling it in or out. You do have to slide it up. It's not just, you do have to slide it up, but it's not just an upward movement. You also have to, it kind of curves back. So you have to put a little bit of effort into getting it to slide back. So simply drawing it from your holster, you're not gonna have that problem. You can see in this case here, this hard holster covers that completely, which I would say is definitely one of the strengths of this case, because this way, if you're drawing, no matter what you do with your thumb, you're not gonna touch that safety because it's behind that shroud. And now, by the time it's out here, you've already got a better grip on it, and you don't have to worry about hitting that safety. Now I have a couple different size DeSantis holsters here. This is a V5, and as you can see, it fits very well in there. The gun does not compass the tip at all, and it just basically is now completely seated in there. Very, very nice fit inside this one. This is kind of the next size up. This is the Q9, and as you can see, it fits, but the gun does come past the end a little bit because this is a little bit too big. It does give it a really nice snug fit, but as you can see here, the the back of the gun can actually get caught on the holster itself. So now if you're trying to draw in a hurry, it may not be possible because it could get the back of the gun stuck underneath the little lip on the fabric. So keep that in mind when sizing your holsters, to always use the right size holster. Again, the last thing you want to do is have a situation where you need to use your firearm and you're not able to get it out cleanly. Now, this won't be a teardown and cleaning video. This is just going to be a review of the gun from the times that I've used it, as well as some of the features on there. If you want to see that, there should be a link in the description to the cleaning video, so keep an eye out for that. So obviously, by the size of the magazines, you can see that this is a double stack magazine. They don't file in single file. You can even see from the sides, those two are close, those three are further away. That's just how the magazines work to give you that capacity. I really like this because my typical carry gun used to be 380, and most 380s are typically 6 shots in the magazine plus 1 in the chamber, whereas this one with the extended magazine is 8 shots plus 1 in the chamber, or even with the smaller magazine, 7 plus 1. So you get an extra 1 to 2 rounds compared to most 380s. I know there's the whole debate between 9mm and 380 being super similar, basically same size of stuff, but there is more force and power behind the 9mm. If you want to argue about that, either do it in the comments or go on some different websites. I'm sure there's tons of people out there that would love to have that debate with you. However, I'm not going to have that debate because this is not about debating the ammunition. This is about the gun itself. So first of all, I want to start with the design of the pistol. You can see that the grip has a very nice texture on it, and it gives you a lot of gripping power. Even if you just have one finger on there, you can feel that it grips really nicely. It feels very nice in the hand, but you can see I have rather large hands, and without the extended magazine, my pinky doesn't really have space to grab on, which is why I like to have the extended magazines, because now that you can see, my pinky fully fits on the gun, whereas without it, while you do get a little bit of a lip from this one, it's not very much, and it doesn't fully sit on the gun. So that is one thing to keep in mind. If you have bigger hands, you definitely want to be using the extended magazine because it gives you that extra finger space. You don't necessarily need it, but since it is a smaller gun, it is nice to have the extra room on there. So grip-wise, it feels really nice in my hand. It fits, my palm fits really nice back here. Plenty of clearance between the slide and my hand. And like I said, with that extra magazine, you have a really nice grip. Now the trigger itself has a built-in safety. A lot of people don't consider trigger safeties an actual safety because they figure, well, if you're pulling the trigger, it's not really a safety if you can just pull it. A lot of people think of safeties as something like this, where you have a physical switch that physically locks out the trigger from being pulled. But in fact, even though this one doesn't have the safety back here, the trigger itself is still considered a safety, because if I were to try to push on just the top part, it doesn't work. I cannot push that back, and I cannot fire the gun simply by doing that. You have to pull the trigger in to get it to fire. And now how it does that is, I don't know how well this will pick up on camera, but there's that little tiny wedge back there, and as you pull the trigger a little bit, it recesses. So if you try to pull it with it extended, you can see it hits the case of the pistol, and as soon as you pull it back, it now allows it to fire. So technically, even though I said this gun does not have a safety on it, it really does have a safety, and it does work. I know that is a lot of concern for some people as well. I don't feel safe having a gun without a safety, because what happens if it just shoots off in your pocket? Well, first of all, a gun isn't just going to shoot off in its pocket unless you've got some super cheap piece of garbage that shouldn't even be mentioned. All modern firearms have multiple redundant safety features to make sure if you drop them, they're not going to fire. If you just bump the trigger, they're not going to fire. There's a lot of safety mechanisms in most modern firearms, and honestly, that's not really something you should have to worry about. Because I know a lot of people who do not like to carry around in the chamber because they're afraid that it might accidentally go off, which is perfectly fine. If you're one of those people, then I understand that train of thought. It's not something I agree with and not something I would ever do, but I do understand it. Now, going back to some of the ergonomics on here, like I said, with the safety here, it is not ambidextrous, it's only on the one side, and so is the magazine release. You can see over here that when you push it, it only pushes one way. You can't push it back the other way. So this is not an ambidextrous gun. I'm not 100% sure if they make different hands for these, but I believe they do. I'll have to double check that. I'm right-handed, so for me, this is all I've ever cared about, but I'm sure there might be different variations out there for people who are left-handed. Now again, I'm not going to get into breaking this down and cleaning it. That will be a future video. Essentially, all you have to do is lock the slide back or hold it back. I prefer locking because it's a lot easier. And then you just have to flip this lever down, and now you can disassemble it. I like this a little bit better than I do the Glocks, because if you don't know, for Glocks, in order to break them down, you actually have to pull the trigger to get the gun disassembled. As long as you know that your firearm is cleared and you've checked it 2-3 times to make sure, then no, there's no risk pulling the trigger. However, it is very possible that you could have an accident with a Glock over something like this because you have to pull that trigger. I would much prefer to take guns apart without ever having to pull the trigger, not because I doubt my ability to check to make sure there's no bullet in there, but it does put you just a little bit closer to having an accident by having a feature like that. So that is one thing that is nice about this gun, is being able to not have to pull the trigger to tear it down. When I'm sliding this back, I'm having to manually push up on this to get it to lock in. If you don't push in it, it will not engage. That's because right now there's no magazine in, telling it that it's empty. This will stay locked back when the last round is fired, and it will lock itself back. Or if you do need to lock it back, such as to disassemble it, then you just push this up as you are sliding that back. And anytime you're using a gun, never just flip this down to try to release the slide. That is a very easy way to damage and break parts of your gun. Always just pull the slide back a little bit and let it go. Now you see on the slide, it does have these little wavy grooves here, and that's to make it a little bit easier for you to pull back, whether you're right-handed or left-handed. You can see it kind of just grips onto it. For me, I always like grabbing the slide. I know it's probably not the best way, but it gives me multiple points to grab onto. If I'm pulling it like this and it slips, then the whole slide slips out. Whereas if I've got it like this, I've got multiple fingers grabbing on plus the palm of my hand to pull it back at the same time. Again, that's more of a preference, but that's kind of how I do it. This pattern here is designed so that you can pull it back without having to grab the slide, because the other problem is if, let's say you're grabbing in the middle and it does slam shut, now your finger is kind of right there, and you could pinch yourself, and I wouldn't say you could hurt yourself terribly bad, but you're gonna wish you hadn't done it. Moving on to the optics, these are the default optics here, and you can see they've got these nice white dots. You've got one up front and two in the back, and they are excellent for shooting at any time, whether it's highlight or low visibility. No real obstructions or anything in here. And right in the top here, there's no round in there, but this, I believe, is your visual round indicator to see if there is a round inside the chamber. Now, a note of warning to you guys is this gun will fire without a magazine in it. Some pistols, if the magazine is removed, then you will not be able to pull the trigger. This gun, however, can pull the trigger when there's no magazine in here. So that's why it's very important just to assume, oh, there's no magazine in there, it's gotta be safe. You always check to make sure there's no round in there, because this gun in particular will fire when there's no magazine. In fact, a lot of the guns out there will fire without the magazine. I've only seen a select few that have it so that it will not fire without the magazine. So that's that. So we've gone over the magazine ejection, the slide lock, the thumb safety, the breakdown lever, the trigger safety, the sights, the grips, and the various magazines. So that's about all I have for this pistol for mechanics and functionality wise. As far as handling, I would say that this pistol, while it's a small pistol, does have a few nice features inside of it, such as the dual recoil springs. Now, I did say I wasn't going to break this gun down, but I do want to show you one really nice feature about this that really helps with the recoil. Now, this is a smaller gun, but you can see inside it does have the dual recoil springs. So it has two springs that really help absorb a lot of the shock from the gun when it is fired. So like I said, being a smaller gun, having that dual recoil spring does help it absorb a lot of the recoil that you feel when this gun is fired. It is still a smaller frame gun. It is a 9mm, so it does have a little bit more kick than a full-size gun would, but the components on here, the heavier slide, the dual recoil spring, really helps absorb a lot of that shock, and it's actually a very nice gun to shoot. The sights are very easy to see, and it is very accurate as long as you're an accurate shooter. I mean, let's face it, a gun is only going to be as good as the person shooting it. I've never had any issues with this gun. I've never had any failures to feed, failures to eject, and I've used a wide variety of ammo, including target and range ammo, as well as rounds of self-protection ammo, although that stuff is a lot less, although I shoot a lot less of that, mainly because it is so expensive to do so. And if you look right there, it says caution, capable of firing with the magazine removed. So these guns don't mess around when it comes to that. They've definitely got their marks on there. That's something I talked about earlier. But overall, it's a very nice pistol. There's a multitude of choices that you can choose for holsters, whether you want a hard holster like this. This is an inside the waistband holster, so it clips onto your belt and rides inside your waistband. Very nice, doesn't add a ton of bulk to it. Then you've also got these little paddle holsters that are great for going inside your pocket. I've worn it in shorts, jeans, a bunch of different pants. Now, obviously that could change depending on what kind of pants they are, how big the pockets are. But for me, I've never had an issue getting this inside of anything. And the nice thing about this holster is it does kind of give it a different style profile. It kind of looks like a phone or some other object. I would highly recommend carrying something like this rather than just having it in your pocket. The reason I wouldn't say to stick this in your pocket is because it could get scratched up and dinged up if you've got other stuff in there. It also lets lint and other particles get inside the gun, which could jam it up and cause problems for you down the road. It's a very nice gun. It's got a decent amount of weight to it. You can see it's kind of top heavy right now, but that's because there's no magazine in it. As soon as you stick a magazine in there, it is very, very well balanced. Like I said, recoil wise, it's very nice. It absorbs a lot of the recoil for you. And it's just a very fun gun to shoot. It's nice to have because you can have the 8 rounds in the magazine plus 1, so a total capacity of 9 rounds, which is very nice for any self-protection pistol. And it's small enough to go virtually anywhere. If you choose to have the thumb safety, just make sure you practice using it and you are aware of it so that if you ever did have to use the pistol, you know what would be stopping the trigger from getting pulled and you're that much more familiar with it. But other than that, I don't have too much more to say other than this is a very nice gun. And the reason I picked it up is because they had such a great deal. I want to say this was $350 with a $50 mail-in Visa gift card. So I think it was around like $300 or maybe it was $400 with a $50 mail-in rebate card. Either way, amazing price on these things. And it's a very, very high quality gun. It's a Smith & Wesson Military and Police 9mm Shield. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did and you want to see more reviews like this, let me know by hitting the like button and subscribing to see when other videos come out, such as the teardown and cleaning of this pistol. Thank you for watching.